Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into today's training session on creating a budget and planning for six-figure success. My name is Thomas Heimann, founder and CEO of Realty Partners, and your host today. And I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to help some of you with your real estate business as we're moving in the second half of this year. Now, again, my name is Thomas Heimann, and I have firsthand experience in what it takes to build a successful real estate business. I got involved in real estate as an agent back in 2003 and initially started with a company, great company locally here, Michael Saunders and Company, where I was very fortunate to work with a mentor who showed me the ropes of real estate, how to write contracts, how to do this and that. But from day one, I wanted to build a successful high volume team. And I followed the Craig Proctor program. I joined this coaching program. And so at the end of 2003, I joined Remax at the time, which was the best platform for me to build my team. And so my background is business. I'm an entrepreneur. I've built a number of successful businesses in the past. And so I approached the real estate business exactly the same way, which is as a business. I think one of the challenges in real estate that I see is that an agent gets excited about the opportunity. You know, maybe you have a friend or family member that's about to buy or sell something, and in your mind you figure, there's a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 transaction that's a $15,000 commission. It's easy money. I'm going to get my real estate license. I'm going to get into real estate, and if I just do a handful of transactions, I'm going to make all this money. And truth to be told, there are agents making a lot of money in real estate. Those are the agents that, by and large, treat it as the business that it is. But there are also a ton of people that are struggling in real estate, living from paycheck to paycheck, and they want to be successful. They want to create a six-figure income, but they're kind of stuck in a place and not really sure how to move forward with this. So a while back, I did a presentation on the mindset, a six-figure mindset, which is really the core foundation. If you're going to be a six-figure performer or producer, you need to have the right mindset. You need to have a certain value that you place on your time, and you need to have the right psychology and strategies and tools and resources to make that happen. Today, I'm going to talk about something that really falls into the category of strategies more than anything else, and it's about budgeting and planning. And again, real estate is a business, and to be successful at this business, you have to treat it as such. Now, you wouldn't run out to start a restaurant or a frozen yogurt franchise or any kind of store, retail establishment, or a consulting business or whatever it is, without having a plan in place and without having the budget and resources to make that happen. So for some of you, this might be a little bit of a downer session because I'm going to be totally brutally honest with you what it takes to create a six-figure business in real estate, a long-term business, not just one where you get lucky and have a couple of deals and make a bunch of money and then spend it and back to square one, but really a lasting business. And I think you're going to find this interesting and applicable regardless of what company you're with, whether with our company, you're another company. The principles really all apply the same. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of resources as well that you might want to check out for a little bit more, backup information on some of these things. I have a Q&A feature enabled in this Google Hangout. So if you have any questions, there should be on your top right-hand corner of the screen, the ability to leave a question, and then I'm going to get to it at the end of the presentation. And as always, you can also contact me anytime at my email address. So without further ado, let's get started with some of the information that I've prepared for you. And again, the theme today is budgeting and planning, or how to make $100,000 a year in real estate. So let's take a look. What does it require to be successful? Again, we're talking about business success in the real estate industry. And to be honest with you, these are principles that apply to any kind of business, whether it's real estate or any other business for that matter. And here are some of the key ones. Number one, obviously, you need to know your outcome, your goal, what it is that you want to accomplish. So if you are in real estate right now, or if you're thinking about getting into real estate, the first question that you have to ask yourself is, what income do I want to create? Are you looking to make $50,000 a year? Are you looking to make $100,000 a year? Are you looking to make $1 million a year? And all of those things are possible. There are agents that are doing that. There are agents that do, 3 deals a year. There are agents that do 20 deals a year. There are agents that are doing 200 deals a year, and there are agents that are doing 1,000 deals a year. So you need to have, in your mind, crystal clear, what is your outcome that you're after, so you can then go after that. The second thing that you're going to need is a blueprint for success. You need to have a budget, and you need to have a plan. How much money are you going to take in? How much money are you going to spend? What's your outflow on a monthly basis to generate a certain net income? And what kind of plan are you going to have in place to get there, and how are you going to execute on it? And the budget especially is really a living, breathing thing, because things change and circumstances change, and you need to be very flexible in adjusting it, but you need to have an initial blueprint that you can follow. And then last but not least, you have to execute and manage. And another word for managing really is measuring. You need to know what's working, what's not working, what kind of results are you getting when you take a certain action. The definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So management really is the art of measuring, seeing what you're getting, and then making adjustments. I don't know if you're a pilot, but if you're a pilot, you fly from point A to point B. You're constantly adjusting. You're really zigzagging your way there. The same thing holds true in business. And again, you've heard the old saying, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. So having a plan in place is incredibly important. And the truth is, most agents simply just fly by the seat of their pants, and then they wonder why they're not getting predictable results. Now, I want to talk to you about a couple of key concepts. I'm going to spend some, more time on some of them, a little bit less time on others of them, but a couple of key concepts that I want you to be familiar with is, number one, your average transaction revenue. What's your average revenue, gross revenue, top line revenue that you have per transaction? Believe it or not, a lot of agents really aren't clear on that. So in order to arrive at this number, you need to know what is your average transaction size, both in your market. What's the median home sale price in your market? Let's say it's $190,000 vis-a-vis what is your personal average transaction, your farm area, your market that you're going after. Some of you might have a $75,000 average transaction. Some of you may have a $250,000 average transaction. Some of you may have a $500,000 or $1 million average transaction. And then you need to look at what is the revenue that is generated from that transaction. What's your income per transaction? And on the listing side specifically, because you have a lot more direct expenses associated on the listing side, you may want to discount that average revenue by your direct expenses. So for example, let's say you have $1 million average transaction on the listing side, and your 3% commission is $30,000, but then you're spending an average of, let's say, $2,500 on photography and collateral materials, and maybe another average of $1,000 on catering and events per listing that you sell. That's $3,500, and you only sell one of two listings on average. So that means your average cost per listing would then be really $7,000, because you're spending that $3,500 on two listings to sell one. So that discounts your average revenue from $30,000 down to $23,000. And that's before broker splits and other things. So you really want to get clear on that. The next item is your customer acquisition cost. That is, what is the average cost to you to acquire a customer? So when you generate a buyer, when you generate a seller, what's your average cost in terms of marketing, et cetera, to acquire that customer? And really, you need to have a certain number of customers in place before you can really determine that cost. Initially, when you start out, you might set a goal, but until you have generated 20, 30 customers, you really cannot have a predictable number. So this is going to be a floating target that will update all the time. When you get your first customer, here's how much it costs. When you get your second customer, here's how much it costs. Once you have 10 customers, here's how much it costs. And also, buy side versus sell side, what's your customer acquisition cost? And just an idea to keep in mind, let's say, for example, if your average transaction is $200,000 and your average transaction revenue is $6,000 on that, and you have a, let's say, $500 customer acquisition cost, but you have other transactions, let's say you execute on a different farm area marketing campaign or just a different campaign attracting customers at a higher price point. And let's say at that price point, you have an average transaction of $500,000 and your average transaction revenue is $15,000 on that transaction. And you now pay, let's say, $1,000 per customer instead of $500. Which one is better? Clearly, the $1,000 is better, But it's sometimes difficult to grasp that concept when you're first starting out or you're first starting to put a plan in place. How much money to spend. I talked to an agent a few weeks ago and about a great marketing resource, and it's a subscription service, and it's like $1,700 a month. And while that's a lot of money, $700 a month, that's almost $10,000 a year. Sure, but really, what does it translate into? What is the customer acquisition cost? What is the true cost? $10,000 a year seems like a lot, and if you're only bringing in $15,000 or $20,000 in return, that really is a lot. That would be like 50% customer acquisition cost. But if you bring in $60,000 or $70,000 or $80,000 as a result, then it's actually dirt cheap. Your cost to deliver service. This is also something that you need to get really clear on. And on the buyer side, the cost to deliver service is relatively linear. At some point, you're going to determine how many showings you do on average, how many trips you take on average per customer. And I guess you could drill it down even to the number of miles that you drive. On the listing side, it's a little bit different story. You may have one uniform listing plan that you apply to everyone, whether it's a $100,000 listing or $1 million listing, or you may have, ABC, 3 different kind of listing plans that you apply. But, you need to understand what your cost is to deliver the service that you provide. If you have a listing plan for high end, mid end, and low end, what is the cost to deliver each service? And you need to always discount that cost by your dropout rate. So again, if you're taking 3 listings and selling 2, then obviously the cost per listing has to include the one that is lost, because you're still spending the money on that, but you're not having a closing, so that cost needs to be spread out over the transactions that you do close. The business budget, I'm going to talk about that at quite some length today. I'm going to walk you through a sample spreadsheet that I set up, and I'll actually provide you with a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, so you can create your own budget. And then we have a marketing plan. A marketing plan really is a predetermined plan that you put in place where certain activities happen on a regular basis, as opposed to this hit and miss. Sometimes I'll do this, sometimes I'll do that. A marketing plan is something that happens on a consistent, ongoing basis. And just like any other business, if you have a restaurant, you would have a marketing plan where you're going to run certain ads, do certain Groupons, do certain things on an ongoing basis. And likewise, for your real estate business, you need to do the same thing. And then critical drivers, or KPIs, key performance indicators. It is so important that you understand what your critical drivers are. And I'm going to share with you what mine were when I ran my business. And you can measure those constantly, literally, daily, weekly, monthly. And I'm going to walk you through that. But this is where management comes in. The critical drivers are the important things that have to happen that drive your business, where a small difference, a small improvement makes a huge difference. And the reason you need to measure these on an ongoing basis is, number one, you can quickly spot a problem when something is not going right. And you can also quickly spot where something is happening when something is going extremely well, and so you know immediately what the source is and you can troubleshoot it. And without managing those critical drivers, you're just lost. I mean, if you manage your business just by one item, number of closings, or how much money is brought in, then you may find that, okay, I've been making $10,000 a month every month for the last 12 months, and then this month I made $3,000, or this month I made $20,000, but you have no idea what caused that. So KPIs are incredibly important, and I'm going to walk you through that as well. Now, let's take a look at budgeting. Budgeting is, those things, nobody really likes to do it unless you have a background in finance, because it's really a pain in the behind. And I got a couple of rule of thumbs here. The first one is on the desired net income of $100,000. And, a good rule of thumb, and it's an incomplete rule of thumb, as you'll find in a few minutes, is to say, okay, marketing budget, $25,000, broker split, $25,000. So GCI, gross commission income needed, $150,000. So just like a rule of thumb, over the thumb, and it's incomplete. But just to give you a ballpark idea, if you want to make $100,000, you really need to generate $150,000 in gross commission income. And that doesn't even include, your car lease and cell phone and other things. But this is a good starting point. And the marketing budget is a little over $2,000 a month. So to dumb it down a little bit, you need to spend $2,000 a month to generate $150,000 in gross commission income, which will then give you $100,000 net income. On the right-hand side, we have the $1 million goal. And the $1 million goal, really, these numbers work across the board. And I invite you to pick up Mr. Keller's book, Millionaire Agent, which also breaks it down. But basically, in order to make $1 million, you need to generate $2.5 million in gross commission income. Why the big difference? Well, the $1.2 million broker split, it's really not just your broker split, but it's the commissions that you're paying out. In order to make $1 million, you need to have a team of buyer agents, and you got to get a 50-50 split with them. So you're going to be paying out a lot in terms of commissions to your team members, and you have, of course, other operating expenses as well. So when you look at the 2.5 million gross commission income, you're probably going to have, a chunk of that that's listing driven revenue that you handle yourself. You're not paying a split on that, but then you have some listings that are handled by your team where you're paying them a split. And then you have obviously the buyer side business that is handled all by your team where you're paying them a 50-50 split. So these numbers really are fairly accurate. So in order to make $1 million, you need to spend $300,000 or $25,000 a month on marketing, and you need to generate about $2.5 million in gross commission income. I want to go ahead and look at a budget in a little bit more detail, though. And I've prepared a spreadsheet, and I'm going to go ahead and walk you through that spreadsheet and just give you an idea of basic budgeting and how to make the numbers work. The first thing in budgeting is to understand the budget categories. And again, this spreadsheet I'm going to make available to you later. When you look at the budget categories, we have revenue categories, and so we have listing commission, buyer side commission. So you want to break that out, the two. Your transaction fees, you might charge $495 per transaction in transaction fees. Any referral fees that you get. So these are your revenue types and categories. And you add all that up, you have your gross income. Then you have your cost of sales. And your cost of sales might include your broker split, your buyer agent split, if you have buyer agents on your team, any transaction fees that you paid. You may charge $495 per transaction, but your broker might charge you $195 per transaction. So that becomes a cost of sales to you. And then there might be other fees. So all of this here would be a cost of sales. So you deduct that from your gross income, and that gives you a gross profit. So right there, you can see that there's quite a discount taken. Your cost of sales add up to about 23% total, and you have a gross profit of $10,000. Now your expenses, we start with office rent or desk fees, and I just plugged in some, average fees in there. You get your telephone. Let's say you're on a cell phone plan, might be $100 a month between cell phone and data. Let's say you have internet access, might cost you $50 a month. You get computer services, so you might have your Dropbox or some other computer services, LinkedIn, that sort of thing. So let's say $50 a month. That's a reasonable budget. Boards and dues, I just spread it out over the year. Let's say on average it might be $1,000, $1,200 a year that you pay for your boards, dues, and licensing. Insurance, let's say auto insurance. You have a newer car, nice car. It might be $100 a month. Automobile, obviously, you're spending a lot of time in your car. You might be leasing a car, and 50%, 75% of your car usage might be automobile expense. Now, I don't want to give you any tax advice, but there are in essence two ways you can expense your automobile expenses. One is to diligently count your miles and then write off the allowance per mile. The other one is to take your total cost for your automobile, your lease payment if you're leasing, gasoline, maintenance, repairs, service, all of that, and then figure a percentage of that. So if you're spending, let's say, $700 a month for everything all together, and you have 50% usage, then that would be $350. Printing and postage, this would not be direct mail. This would just be, sending thank you cards, sending general, mailers here and there, but not farm area direct mail. That would be a marketing expense. And then, printing, the stationery for your regular correspondence or some business cards and things like that. Office supplies, shouldn't really be very much. And let's say miscellaneous other, it's always good to have a miscellaneous other expense. So if you add all of that up, so you got $1,245 a month just in general administrative type of expenses to run your business. Then we come to marketing. IDX website hosting, an average IDX website, and I'm not talking about anything exciting, an average one is going to cost you about $350 a month. For an outstanding website, you're looking at $1,500 to $2,500 per month. For something like Boomtown or Tiger Leads or Commissions Inc. or Agent Jet, those are all $2,000, $2,500 plus per month. And but I just put in an average website here. Of course, you can get also something really, really cheap for $100 a month, but you might as well just save your money because they're going to be completely useless. You need to obviously generate traffic to your website. So we have pay-per-click marketing, Facebook marketing. You get your Zillow internet leads, your Realtor.com internet leads that you might be subscribing to. So you're going to be spending money on marketing, on lead generation. So we got about $1,600 on internet marketing total, and I just throw out these numbers here. And then direct mail, $250 a month, which really is just bare bones marketing. I can tell you when I ran my team, I spent a lot more money than that. Especially because it was very, very listing heavy, and I would do, just listed, just sold cards plus general mailers. But but this is just a minimum placeholder. You have a small farm area, you do some direct mail, you have an expired campaign. So you're looking at about $2,200 in marketing. And then let's say on the payroll side, we got a category of virtual assistant. So that might be something that you might utilize a virtual assistant to either help you with your calls to prospects, your follow-up calls, or with your listing packages, or content to closing. A VA is really an inexpensive way to go. But if you build a team, let's say you want to really go the next step and grow it and go to a couple of $100,000, $500,000, you will have some admin salaries. When I ran my team, honestly, my first hire was an assistant, and I ended up having 2 assistants. So I had 2 assistants at the end and 3 buyer agents. But so you would plug those salaries in there. Also, if you start making money, and I would say don't even think about it until you're making at least $50K in net profit. But once you get to that point, you may want to consider setting yourself up as a PA and paying yourself a salary. So you would put your owner salary in there. And so, obviously, let's say if you had a profit of $6,000 per month and you paid yourself a $2,500 salary, then that would reduce your net profit for the company, but you reallocate earnings and you tax differently on it. So once you start making money, you might want to look at that. So these are the categories here. And then your total expenses and your net profit EBITDA, which basically means earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So if you purchased your vehicle and you're writing it off, you would have depreciation expenses. Obviously, if you're spending, financing things, you have interest payments that would be an expense. Taxes, of course, are an expense. So this is just your net profit EBITDA. So it's really profit before taxes. And these are dynamic fields, so you can use a spreadsheet and plug in your own numbers. But this is just an example. What if your average transaction was $200,000 a month? And what if you did 1 closing on the listing side, 1 closing on the buyer side, so you have 2 closings a month, 24 closings a year. Here would be the year-to-date figures. And I want you to look at this column here, because just as a reality check, under this scenario here, you have 2 closings a month, averaging $6,000 GCI per closing. You're grossing $155,880 per year. That would be 100%. Now, your broker split, 20% comes to $31,000. Now, we both know that you can do better than that. Realty Partners, for example, caps out at $15,000. But some brokers charge 20 or even more %. But this might be something where you could reduce your costs. And then transaction fees paid versus transaction fees collected. In this case, your cost of sales is 23%, so your gross profit is 77%. Now your G&A, your general administrative expenses, are 10% of the top line gross commission income. Your total marketing expenditure is 17% of the top line gross commission income, so it's actually fairly low. To be honest with you, when I ran my team, I wanted to grow it aggressively, so I always had to spend more to make that happen, and I spent actually about 30%. I remember when I first joined RE/MAX and I started my team and I put in place my plan, I didn't have any listings, and back then, the thing to do was advertising in Homes and Land magazine and Real Estate Book. And I literally went to all the agents in our office and asked them if I could advertise their listings. And I hit the ground running with 2 full-page ads, double spread in Homes and Land magazine with all these listings that I advertised for the other agents in the office. So if you want to grow your business, obviously you're going to spend more. Your total expenditures, including marketing and everything, are roughly 30%, and so your net is 47% because you got the 23% gross commission income. So in this case, with a typical broker split, $155,000, you're netting $72,000. If a broker charges less, you might be down to, you might be making $80,000, $85,000, $90,000. but this is kind of giving you an idea. Now, I created a budget sample of the cuff for six-figure income. Let's say you set your sights higher and you are having a $250,000 average transaction, and your gross commission income is $7,500 per transaction. So now you're grossing $191,000 with your 24 transactions. All the other expenses really are relatively the same, except for on the marketing side. I pushed it up to, from $400 to $500 per category, but your percentage is still the same, 16 to 17%. Your bottom line improved a little bit from 47 to 52%, but you'd be here at 100,000. And again, in this particular case, the broker split, I reduced it to 15%, but you're still at 28,000. Again, you can do a lot better than that. But it gives you kind of an idea. It's kind of like a guideline as to what you can expect. So let me go back to the presentation. So like I said, this is just a rule of thumb. And of course, the higher you set your sights, the more the numbers are going to change, So if you want to do $250,000 or $500,000, you probably need to get some help. So you're going to have some additional expenses and your margin is going to go down. All right, let's talk about a marketing plan. And let's say you put your budget in place, and on your budget you basically have your general administrative, your fixed expenses. I mean, you know what you're going to pay for your cell phone, for your car, for your broker fees, your desk fees, your fixed monthly expenses. You got to plug those into the spreadsheet, and that'll give you an idea how much you need to do to break even. And then you have to decide what is going to be your marketing budget. And I would certainly not do less than 15%. And so if you wanted to make 100,000, you're probably gonna have to do 150,000 or thereabouts in gross commission income minimum, if not more. And you're gonna have to invest $2,000 to $2,500 a month in marketing. If you don't have that, then maybe let's focus on $50,000 and put in place $1,000, $1,200 a month marketing budget. And but you have to put a budget in place that you will then execute on. Okay. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. If you just hit and miss, think you're going to put a couple of ads on Craigslist and maybe spend $200 a month for some cheap lead generation program, it's not going to work for you, and you won't be able to really measure and see what works or not until you A, measure your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and B, do it for 6 to 9 months. Okay, so once you have your budget in place, your marketing plan really is going to break down into daily, weekly, and monthly activities that need to be scheduled. So you need to have a daily routine, and initially you're going to be doing all of it yourself. Down the road, you may hire someone else to assist you with it, okay? So let me give you an idea on daily activities. Number one, social media posting. You may want to use a tool such as Hootsuite, where you can post to multiple social media accounts at the same time by just making one post, so it'll save you time. But your social media posting, whether it is posting a link to IDX website to generate leads and have like a daily lead generation thing where you post a different property every day, whether it's an interesting article, you may want to set up a Google search to let you know when there is XYZ real estate news, so you can then grab the article and post it to social media. But you should have a routine maybe twice a day to do some social media posting. Prospect follow-up calls, so important. You got to schedule time every day to make your follow-up calls to your prospects. And I would say at a minimum, I would set aside an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon, and you just make call after call until you hit all of your prospects. Okay. If you're first starting out, you don't have any prospects, great, you're done after 5 minutes. But if you have 100, 200, 300, 400 prospects in your pipeline, you probably try to call 100 people and connect with 10 of them, So you want to block that time. It has to be a daily thing. It can't be just an afterthought. MLS research, that's something I would do every single morning. And at some point I would hire a VA in India to do it for you and just send you a report But you want to know for your farm area what's happening every single day for your key areas. New listings, under contract, sold, expires. What's going on, and then also broader on the market, just to get an idea. Within your price point, what's happening in Sarasota or Manatee County or wherever you're doing business. So you want to have, like half an hour in the morning should be enough, but to do really concise MLS research. And what I used to do, and then later I had my assistant do, is actually plug those numbers into an Excel spreadsheet so I could see, trending week to date, month to date, and so forth. And then later, I actually had my assistant collate for me a very comprehensive weekly report that had all the information in there. And then any appointments that you might have on a daily basis, buyer appointments, listing appointments, and so forth. Weekly activities, again, you want to have them scheduled on your calendar. You want to have your listing promotions and ads, whatever it is that you do on an ongoing, repeated basis for your sellers. So if you have a listing, obviously at a minimum, you want to post it once a week, repost it to your Facebook page, both your business page and your personal page. On your business page, you certainly want to do a boost and make sure that it links back to your IDX website so you can capture a lead. You may want to put out a weekly seller report. I know ListHub is providing reports on a weekly basis about activities on the online listings for the property, but you may have your own seller report. But I would definitely email out a weekly update report to the seller. Here's what's been going on, how many calls, how many hits on the website, how many showings, feedback, et cetera, et cetera. Expired mailings. Expired farming really is one of the easiest and key things to do to generate listing leads. And so if you do an expired mailing campaign, it has to be ongoing every single week until they either relist or die or go away. And I personally used to have a program that went for 6 months. So for 6 months, if a listing expired, every single week I would send them a letter with my card in it and something else in it. First couple of letters had my refrigerator magnet in it with a calendar. And then after that, just my business cards, and every letter had like a little different point, a little different angle, and I would just get them out every single week. Seller calls, same thing. If you have current listings, you at a minimum need to talk to them on the phone once a week. Hey, just to let you know, I'm getting your seller report out and mail to you or email to you right now. Just to let you know, here's what happened, XYZ, feedback you received, and so forth. And then last but not least, on the weekly basis, you really absolutely need to role play. So if you are working with buyers and doing buyer presentations, or you're working with sellers and doing listing presentations, you need to role play. Find family members, friends, team members, people in your company, whatever. But I would say at least once a week, do a role playing with someone. Do one buyer presentation, do one listing presentation, and do it with different people, so that they can give you feedback and they can ask you silly questions. And so after you've done that, 20, 30, 40 times, when you're then talking to a real buyer or seller, you're going to be a well-oiled professional. So role playing is absolutely key. The same for phone scripts. When you do your prospect calls, you want to do some role playing with some buddies and just, do some pretend calls. It's very, very, very important. And monthly activities, this is something that would include farm area mailings, where once a month you do your farm area mailings. And if you use a provider like Prospect Plus, for example, you can automate these things. So they do it for you. You don't have to think about it. If you're doing it yourself, then obviously you do have to think about it. Any other direct mail that you do. And then once a month, I would suggest having a prospect call night where you block literally like 3 hours from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and you do nothing but make calls. So every single prospect that you have in your database that you have not talked to, you would call them. So, that might be 200-300 dials. Unless you connect with a bunch of people, then obviously the number of calls will be less, but I would just consistently set that aside once a month and make these calls. So, and that really forms your marketing plan. So Based on your budget, you will know, okay, I have my Google AdWords pay-per-click campaign. So you set that on automatic pilot, really, then you measure what you're getting from it and you do fine tune it, but you don't have to do something on a daily basis, obviously. The prospect calls, of course, are something that needs to be done on a daily basis. Critical drivers or key performance indicators are the tools that help you measure what you're getting. And it's really, really, really super important that you do that. And if you don't have that in place right now, set up a spreadsheet, use a legal pad, whatever, and start collecting this information. And again, personally, I just used an Excel spreadsheet, and you want to do it on a daily basis. So the first key performance indicator, obviously, is new leads generated. New leads drive everything, and you have to consistently generate a certain number of leads. And at some point, you will know what your ratios are. In order to get one listing, you need to get this many listing presentations. To get this many listing presentations, you need to get this many appointments and this many leads. So everything works back to new leads generated. Everything starts out with leads generated. So at some point, you will know, to get one closing, I need X leads. Let's say to get one closing, you need 25 leads. So then you can very easily adjust your planning. If you want to double your closing, you got to double your leads. So new leads generated, and you want to go by source and daily, weekly, monthly. So you want to have a spreadsheet and put those numbers in every single day. And then obviously you have your weekly total and you have your monthly total. The next key performance indicator is new contacts made. And by that I mean first time new lead reach. And that will give you a ratio of how many leads equal how many contacts, okay? So if you get 10 new leads in, how many of them do you actually end up connecting with? So I would, some people might count, total calls made, period, across the board, and that's fine too. But you also want to have, new contacts made, first time contacts, daily, weekly, monthly. The next one is appointment set. Appointments drive everything. And that holds true on the buyer side and the seller side. When I was working as an agent myself, and when I talked today to successful agents, agents that really are doing 50 plus closings a year and are fairly successful, appointments are one of the key drivers for both of them. Obviously listing appointments, but also buyer appointments. So just as when you have a seller prospect and the timing is right and they seem like a bona fide prospect, you offer to meet them at their home, even just to give them ideas about what they can do for the property. So you might not even call it a listing appointment, but it really is a listing appointment. The same thing holds true on the buyer side. So on the buyer side, you want to set an appointment. And then appointments held. So there's a ratio, obviously, just because you set 10 appointments doesn't mean that 10 appointments are held. There are no-shows, there are cancellations, etc. So you want to look at appointments set versus appointments held ratio. And if you use an assistant, an inside sales agent, a telemarketer kind of person to help you with setting appointments, then I would compensate them based on appointments held. So they're not only incentivized to quote unquote set appointments, which are just flaky and nobody's there, but you want to make sure that there are confirmation emails, confirmation text messages, confirmation phone calls, and then that the appointment held ratio is high. I would say you got to have at least an 80% appointment held ratio. And the next key performance indicator is buyer agency and listing signed. So I would really set up key performance indicators separated by buyers and seller and then total them together so you have an overall idea. But how many buyer agency agreements are signed as a result of appointments held? How many listing agreements are signed as a result of a listing appointment set? And then we got showings. How many showings you do for your buyers? How many showings your listings get? How many offers are written or received? And again, I would do that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And how many contracts are executed, buyer side and seller side? How many closings you end up having? And last but not least, how many cancellations do you have. And once you have these numbers in place and you start to measure them, and I would say if you've never done this before, if you start measuring these things for 60 days, you're going to start seeing some trends. And not only will you be able to see what the ratios are between the two, and I would calculate ratios, new leads to appointment set, for example, appointment held to buyer agency listings signed, so many listings signed to contracts executed to closings, etc. So you start to see those ratios, and then the power comes when you look at it on a daily and weekly basis. You're basically starting to manage your business by the numbers, and you will see when there are exceptions, when something goes extremely well and jumps out, and you can then pinpoint it and see what happened here. Was it the appointment held to listing signed ratio, or was it the new leads to contacts made or new leads to appointment set ratio that made the difference here? But you won't know unless you measure these things. Again, you cannot manage what you can't measure. So I know this has been a mouthful and a lot of number boring information thrown at you, but the underlying message again is the real estate business is just that, a business, and you really have to treat it like any other business. And business planning is critical. Having a financial plan is critical. Having a budget in place, and then execute on it and measure what you're getting. That's where the critical drivers come into play, so that you can then make adjustments and see what's working. And you do want to do it by lead source again. So what are the ratios on the Zillow leads versus your PPC website leads versus your direct mail leads? And you're going to see some astounding things. You might find, for example, that your lead to closing ratio is so much better for one lead source versus another, but then inversely, your lead to appointment ratio is better on the other one. And so you can start to make sense of it when you start measuring these numbers. So again, I hope you got some good information out of this. I'm going to post a link to the spreadsheet on our Google Plus page underneath this event, but I'll also be happy to email it to you. So if you want to shoot me an email to Thomas, Thomas, at realty-partners.com, then I'll just shoot out to you the Excel spreadsheet that I put together for the sample budget, and all the fields are linked together and automatically calculating, so you can just plug in your actual numbers and see what you have and see what you need to achieve in order to produce a certain result. Okay? Thank you so much for tuning in, and make it an awesome week, or what's left of it, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Let me take a look real quick if there's anything on the Q&A. And I'm new to this tool myself, so let me find it real quick before we hang up. Okay, there are no questions on the Q&A. Oh, there's one question. Will you provide this Excel spreadsheet with the categories? And the answer is yes. Like I said, I'm going to post it to the Google Plus page, and I am going to email you. If you email to me, Thomas, Thomas, at realty-partners.com, and I will send you this Excel spreadsheet right away. All right. I got another comment here from someone. Joe, well done. I'm going back into real estate with a long-term focus. 2 months or so. This is a great review and reminder. Many thanks for taking the time. Thank you, John, so much for taking the time to invest your time in this presentation. I know time is our most valuable asset. I went a little bit longer than I had anticipated initially, but I hope you got some good information out of this. And again, please email me, and I will be happy to send you the information. And also, you should get an email tomorrow with a link to a replay of this event as well. That'll take you to the event page, and you'll see the Excel spreadsheet there as well. And I look forward to hopefully welcoming you next week to another training session. Thanks so much, and God bless.